Welcome to Percussion Perspectives, a podcast by Henrik Knapgaard Larsen and Håkon Steine. Each episode of Percussion Perspectives features one or more musical artists in conversation about musical education, practice, and aesthetic and sociological perspectives.
Swedish percussionist and conductor Leif Karlsson's professional career began in the mid-1970s, and after co-founding the world-renowned percussion ensemble Kroumata, where he was a member from 1979 to 2008, he gave thousands of performances in 43 countries and some 600 cities worldwide, and released 19 recordings, many of which contained Kroumata's own commissions. The ensemble appeared as soloists with orchestras such as the Los Angeles Philharmonic and the Berlin Symphonic Orchestra, and many, many more. More than 240 works were written for this group by composers such as Sofia Gubaidulina, Sven David Sandström, and Rolf Wallin. The ensemble stopped performing in 2015, at which point Leif had taken on a new career as a conductor and an artistic leader of various ensembles. Our talk took place in the spring of 2022, and touched upon subjects such as how the Kroumata ensemble established itself as one of the main ambassadors of percussion ensemble music throughout the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s, about the idea of state-funded music and art in the social democratic welfare state in these decades, and how these political ideals perhaps were reflected in their artistic practice. We spoke about specific composer collaborations the group did, and more currently, how Leif, now in his 60s, has taken on a new career as a conductor. So Leif, welcome to our podcast and thanks for taking the time to join us. We have so much to talk about. You have a career that spans 40 years now, 30 of them as a percussionist and the last 10, 15 as a conductor. And we're looking forward to hear about your insights and what you can tell us from your life in music.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm so proud of be part of your pod. Absolutely nice.
Great. So the first thing I wondered was if you could talk a little bit about your early professional years. You were a founding member of the Kroumata group in 1978 or something like that. And
yeah, exactly.
And what age were you then?
I was 22.
22 years.
Yeah.
And then you developed that group over a 30-year time period into being one of the leading ensembles globally, perhaps, at least in Europe. And you traveled the world and you did tons of recordings and commissions and everything. So we're going to come back to that a little later. But maybe if you can sort of summarize some of those early experiences and what still is important to you today.
I mean, the thing that I was so young was that I was having a place at the academy when I was 17 years old, and for that sake I was finished with all the exam when I was 21, and then I started that. We started that ensemble, and at that time, at the late 70s, I mean, it's soon 50 years ago, there was not so many percussionists around. Of course, all the orchestras has the older generation guys, but we were a couple of young percussionists that had played percussion ensemble music in our education. And actually we went to Copenhagen. I had a job in the called region music in Västerås, and all these guys were employed, and we were invited by the fantastic the old papa of percussion in
Bentley Love.
yeah
Bentley Love.
Bentley Love, yeah. And after that weekend when we played the ensemble on a certain level, we decided to start the ensemble. But we suffer very much about the perfect music, and we were not so familiar with each other. So it was a sort of 6 different attitude ensemble for the first time. But I mean, I had I think I have 3 important things in my luggage from that I was very young. The thing was when I was I was 12 years old, and in the regional symphony orchestra where we live, they had a Wiener concerto, and they invited that time's big Vienna Philharmonic New Year conductor. His name was Willy Bukowski, to conduct, and he was a guy with a fantastic smile on TV, but he was a big asshole on stage. And he yelled at all the musicians, and between the pieces he turned to the audience and pointed out what musicians had made a mistake during this Wiener waltzes. And something happened to me there. I think that is not the leadership. That is not anything to do with making good music together. So that was an important milestone in my life. So I will not act that way. And the other thing was a couple of years later in the military band where we live, they had a percussionist that was... he was fantastic when he was fantastic, and and he was not so good the other days. I was the extra percussionist almost every week in that orchestra. And one day I picked a military drum, and I went to the rehearsal, and one of the musicians turned to me and said, "Don't you have any sense of taste?" And I was totally afraid of him, of course. But what he meant was, don't you listen or pick an instrument that sounds really good? And that I have also in my positive luggage all my life. And then, of course, my teacher at the academy in Arvika, Björn Lilleqvist, who was a student of Börje Ritz Andersson, actually, in Denmark. So the history goes on, and when we build the Kroumata ensemble, I think we are lucky to be part of the next step of the percussion history.
Please talk a little bit more about the early years of Kroumata. It's 1978, 1979. There aren't many role models around.
No.
So it's basically maybe the Le Percussion de Strasbourg, Nexus in Canada, of course. But as you were a quartet, quintet, and Le Percussion were a sextet.
Yeah, I think we didn't know of Nexus at that time. We will learn to know them later on, but for us it was the guys from France at that time.
Okay.
But Nexus was also sextet first. And then one other guy left them, and they were 5, and then one other guy died, and then there were 4. So it's a history going on.
Right, but take us into those early days of discussing like an artistic profile. How are you going to develop artistically? How are you going to develop an organization, a professional organization? How are you going to develop a playing style, performance style, all those things? I
mean, our goal was to find more interesting pieces to play. And why we decided to be 6 members, it was absolutely because of that the Le Percussion Strasbourg had commissioned a lot of pieces for 6 members, and that was good pieces, and we want to play that. And the pieces that we had performed in our education was more like, American university pieces, and that is something that I have worked against for all my career. I mean, I can understand in one way that many percussionists write their own music, but it is something when you can go to a composer and ask the composer to write a piece for you. And we started to contact our friends. Anders Hillborg, Jan Sandström, Esa-Pekka Salonen, and so on. And we asked them if it's possible to write a piece for us. We promise we will play it, but we don't have any money. And they made some pieces for us, and most of these pieces was very good. In some sentence, they tried out new things. And later in our history, we learn more about to listen to a composer. Maybe we wanted more sounding soft piece, and we look into composers that had written pieces for chorus or for string orchestra or for flute or whatever, harp, and then we talked about each other and said that composer maybe can do a nice piece for us.
Was Gubadulina one such composer, perhaps the sextet with the saxophone quartet?
Yeah, exactly. That was later in the history when she went to be the Polar Prize winner, and that is a story also. She handles the score. I think it was 21 bongos, 14 tempo blocks, and 16 tom-toms, and so on. And we thought of she don't know how to do it, so we put up a little thing there, and 8 tom-toms, 9 bongos and so on. And she was missing something when she came. Hey, I don't hear the melody. And then it was so embarrassing to build up all this. But that is it's a good piece.
We performed it at the Freiburg University before the lockdowns with the Russia Orchestra, with the Russia ensemble.
Yeah. And
it's kind of scary when you open up and see all the drums, but it totally makes sense because of the registers and how she orchestrates.
Exactly.
And one other thing I thought about was the Sandström piece, which became a kind of a hit, right, for you guys, the drums piece, and
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That you also kind of had a reach beyond classical and contemporary audiences.
Yeah, and that piece was actually so that our professor Björn Liljeqvist, he had his own ensemble in Stockholm. It was called Stockholm Percussion Ensemble, and that was built a little bit earlier than us, with his colleagues from the Radio Symphony and the opera and so on, And myself and 2 more of the guys was also playing in his ensemble. And he was a guy that commissioned that piece, the drums by David Sandström. And there we also, these questions when David write 22 against 4 and 18 and hey, what are you doing? This is silly. But he wanted us to try so hard so the audience felt like we were really wanted to do it right, and therefore he got some energy of us playing on stage.
Yeah.
And that piece, I think I played 600 times or something like that.
Right. I heard it a couple of times with you, and it was always amazing. And it has this kind of, speaking of energy, I wanted to ask you about like how you developed this, which is maybe one of the signatures of Kroumata, this kind of incredible joy when you played in this incredible stage presence and the energy, right? So was that something you worked on like in a sort of detailed manner, or was it more intuitive? Because it was maybe a different signature than that of the French style or the European academic style.
Yeah. I think we started also in the academic style. I mean, I think you're supposed to play that manner, and we will also to have this black thing, you know,
turtleneck. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it was a sort of uniform for all contemporary academic music. And then we went to PASIC. We were invited to play at PASIC in 1984. And we premiered a piece by former percussionist and conductor and composer. His name is Harold Faberman. And suddenly we saw too many of these academic guys with all the mallet hanging down the marimbas like a sort of shop, and all these people that took themselves too serious. Yeah. We thought. And then on the plane back home, we said, oh no, we can't do this. We must have more joy. We must feel that we are a sort of rock band. We happened to play new music, contemporary music, but we can do it on a more swinging way. And all of us had played jazz band, big bands and rock bands and so on. So the first thing was we decided to, if there is 4 groups of 16 in the bar, we must play with accent on every beat. It was a simple thing, but it changed a lot in our attitude. And I think also it changed a lot for us approaching an audience that did know nothing about this type of music.
The music goes from cold to warm, so to say. It has a heart. Great. What about the collaborations with people like Xenakis, and you played all the cage music. You recorded the second quartet, the third, the construction. Sorry, this is the second construction, the third construction.
Yeah,
and you had a very sort of again this personality thing coming in, and this very mark of a strong interpretation that you didn't necessarily use those role models that were already out there, but you chose your own way in terms of instrumentation and everything. So take us through that process of choosing instruments. Did you collaborate with people like Cage and Xenakis in person?
No, never. That was a big no in our, all the composers were had to wait outside until we were ready, and then we could meet them. All these younger composers that asked us of a list of our instrument, and we said absolutely no, you will not have anything about that. Please think and imagine to do an interesting piece, and then we take with us all the instruments that you need for that. I mean, we travel in Europe with big van having 3,000 kilo of instruments. We had everything with us. But I think since we were so different with 6 musicians, we were the 3 of us, and I was the youngest of the 3 older guys. We were educated with jazz. So when we thought everything was swinging and everything was tight, we were always a little ahead on the beat, And the 3 younger guys, they leaned back and they were grown up in a sort of funky ways. So a tight thing for them was to wait with the beat. And then we had this gap that was always arguing. But these different attitudes also did that we picked the parts that we thought was appelling to our musicality. Yeah. I was the guy that had played most jazz and so on, and I played a little bit more of the ethnic or congas and bongas and so on. So I picked some instruments for that. And speaking of the cage third construction, at that time I also played in a Renaissance ensemble. And that 3 different hand-make rope the drums I thought was perfect for this piece. And then I could change all colors and in some way. Maybe we did this, what is it called, the piece with percussion ensemble piano.
Credo in Us?
No, the thing with the separated piano.
Amores?
Amores, yes, Amores. And he had Cage pointed out where to play on the head.
Yeah.
And we realized that maybe was perfect with this drum that he happened to had when he composed the piece. But if I should play that piece in my drums, I can do this way instead. So we were very early to be a little naughty in a way to realize that, okay, he or she wanted to have based on the sound that she or he had in the composing process, but that is not interesting anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's also this kind of thinking ahead and speaking a little bit more about Cage and taking it to a maybe even more nerdy level. The way you made your instrumentation for the third construction, I remember you had this kind of, each player had a sort of one type of instrument. So you had this kind of color to each voice instead of having this chaotic tom texture. You had a very distinct color for each. And maybe you can talk about how you distributed that, those roles of picking and choosing.
Yeah, at that time we happened to pick our own parts and our own instrument as well. And the hardest thing for this third construction was to find tin cans that had actually sound. Because all the modern painting cans was more like a lousy drum. But we talked with a baker, and he knew that there was a sort of factory in Stockholm that made sweet things and sauces for these baking places, and they had some old cans with a wonderful sound in it. And we talked about how to have 4 different voices on that piece, 4 different parts of the word. So one of the guys had congas and bongos. I had my old Renaissance drums, and my friend Anders Holdar, he had hand drums that he played with some small sticks on. And all these drums was perfect to play with a finger also. And I think our friend Roger, he played on this Japanese or Chinese drums, you know. So everybody had very pregnant and distinct sound. And then we added some, we took away this shell, you know, for the blow-in. And we had
conch shell, the conch
shell, yeah. And we had the Swedish sort of... Lur, yeah. Nävelur.
Yeah, the wooden horn. The kind of, I don't know. I have to find out what it's called in English. But the
long one, you know. So. Yeah. And we also invented some cans with things in, so we could play even softer than was possible in ours. So it was very interesting to
have the
this.
rattles.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember that.
Also, when we, I think this is 2 parts of that piece that have lion's roar, and we experimented a lot to not only have this sound, because we wanted different sound. And we wanted a sound that started a little soft and became a little dangerous and then disappeared by then. And that was also very nice.
Sounds like you had a lot of fun in inventing new.
Yeah. And Actually, when we played in this basic thing, we met John Cage.
He was there in '84.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was there. Yeah, he was supposed to be honored by this Hall of Fame thing.
Right.
They want him to talk a little about percussion, but he wanted only to talk about mushrooms at that point.
Right.
Yeah, and we were waiting in a long line. You know, us meeting the king or something like that. You know, we were waiting there, and then suddenly we're in front of him. We shook his hand, and we said that we are Kroumata from Sweden, and we send you a record. You are Kroumata from Sweden. Thanks for the record. And then he was totally silent. And we didn't know how to act, and the line behind us was a little bit arguing, you know, hey, go away, it's our turn. And then he realized that it became a little odd situation. So he said, aha, you mean so, but you see, I don't have any machine, so I can't play it.
Yeah, and listen to the recording.
That pieces he wrote on the late 40s. So, I mean, it was a big gap between that and now.
Right.
But it was a little story. But later on, it was more like we handle over all the instrument picking for one guy in the ensemble. That we can talk more about later, maybe.
That's in a sense handing over a lot of artistic agenda to one person. Speaking a bit broadly about percussion instrumentation as a part of interpretation, because it's sort of important how your piece sounds. Mallets, all these things. It's not just pick a piano and play the notes on the piano. It's all about the skins and the type of mallets and the all sorts of practical things in a sense. But what sort of competence do you feel was or is required to kind of make coherent decisions in that regard when you make an interpretation of a piece of music? You said on one hand that you want to pick your own, you want to find your own space, but you also relate to a tradition. You also relate to an interpretation tradition. In this case of Xenakis, for instance. Yeah. He's after certain things. Can you discuss that a little bit? What kind of competence, or you mentioned taste before. What is at stake when you just go for your own thing, and what do you win and what do you lose when taking such a decision?
I mean, there are also composers like Rolf Wallin that are very specific with his instrument, and that the highest instrument in every set of stone waves, as an example, has to be about the same tune or something like that. But it's when we started in the school, we had, of course, professor that was the taste guy that say maybe they're more less softer, harder, and so on. And then we realized that we don't have that anymore. We have to be professors for each other all the time, and we became extremely honest with each other. So honest that people that were visiting us, soloists and other, always thought that we were angry at each other. Because it was so, no pardon, you know. I can't hear you, but I like to have this sound. No, you need to have sharper mallets, but it sounds not so good. But play softer with harder sticks. But it's a little hard. Yeah, practice. I mean, it was always very, very hard. And the guys that had read more in the score has more to say, of course, and we learn after some arguing that if you don't have the skills of learning the score, you don't have so much to say about the whole thing. And I think in that period we started to ask our member Roger to always pick all the instruments. And for instance, when we play the Peaux movement of the Xenakis Pleiades, which I will conduct now with the Royal Academy School this spring, celebrating his 100 years anniversary.
Yes.
Yes. Roger decide exactly what tom-toms we should have, and he looked at the score and said, "Hey, that part of playing a little bit more on the upper one, he must have the best top tom-tom," and so on. And that was nice, because from that point, I think we had a more homogeneous sound in our ensemble. But of course, it was fighting and arguing and so on.
How did you work on that piece, though? Because you were probably one of the first ensembles in the world to perform that piece, and also so extensively. What was it like when you first opened that score for the first time, and then you played it probably hundreds of times? I don't know. Can you talk about that transformation in a sense? How you... Mm-hmm. I mean, there is a video online, I think, where you played on I'm not sure if it's the Polar Music Prize or the Nobel Peace Prize or something, where it seems like it's a walk in the park for you guys. Mm-hmm. You're just having fun. Yeah. And but I'm guessing it was a little different when you had no role models, no one to listen to.
No, exactly. I mean, two of our members played the piece in London at some point, and some percussion festival that they had in London, and Xenakis was there, and they came back and said that this part was about impossible to play after, and then we talked with the publishers Calabert, and we fixed so we had another more easy readable scores, and then we played rehearsed the piece with the conductor, of course, and the first couple of times, or first 20 times, we did it with conductor, and then we realized that the Peaux movement was the easiest one to do without the conductor, and also there we thought that this is rock and roll. If we should play it in a sort of academic style, it should be silly in a way. Even if Xenakis was not a rock star, I mean, he was a composer, and he was no more interesting of the mathematics of the pieces. But when we played it, we thought it must be rock and roll. I mean, this fuga that I started in the beginning of that is pure rock and roll, and if you think that you move like rock stars in a way, and that's why you saw that on the video, and we also made it so that because these pieces are divided 3 and 3 players, and the middle guys was the guy that showed us else how to make this 7 to 9 to 8 or something like that.
The polyrhythms,
yeah. And since I am left-handed, it was a little hard to do all this 16 with the wrong hand, so therefore I had one extra bongo.
On the left side, by the bass drum.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not?
yeah. And then I also had this heavy bass drum beater that was put on the head, so I could really smack them, because we learned that playing with the wooden stick on the bass drum was not the best sound.
Right.
But we also order. This is fun to talk about.
You have your special sticks, your special Xenakis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We happened to buy. I think it was in the Slagtøy Center in Copenhagen. Yeah. They had some wooden sticks for surdo.
Big head, thick.
Exactly. Exactly. And we thought that must be perfect for tempo block, wood block, bongos, congas, and tom-toms. And so with a more heavy stick, you can also have a more rich sound.
Yeah.
And we both everything that they had on this stock. And when this was broken, we asked a guy in Stockholm to make this type of stick for us.
Yeah, because it just again about finding hardware and sounds that really supports your interpretational idea of this kind of rock and roll thing.
Yeah,
that you really went for. I remember that bass drum stroke you're talking about, by the way, from the video. It's one of the from the pure visual impact it has on the video, the way you play that bass drum. It's amazing, a great inspiration.
I mean, you don't have to play so hard, but it's nice for the audience.
Yeah, I heard you play the piece live also a couple of times in Oslo, and I. Speaking of loudness, I think my loudest Kroumata memory was when you played a piece by Dror Feiler at the Ultima Festival in the 90s sometime. You remember with the drill, the electric, this a very special one, but where you went all in for the loudness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But then you also had this kind of comical moments where you played the ragtime with a video or something, with a film.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you had this very broad spectrum. But
we also learned that it was so important to meet the audience. I mean, meet people that, I mean, we could have performed for composers and nerdy percussionists all our life, but we wanted to make a bigger audience, and the down point was up in in the north in Luleå. There were 8 people in the audience, and we had a whole stage filled with instruments, and we thought we must do something here. And one of the things we talked about was we cannot make any seminar about music they don't have heard before. So we must make better contact with the audience, talking about other things. I mean, all the jazz musicians or singer-songwriter, they are fantastic talking with people, tell a little story or have a little laugh, and then they do the music.
Yeah.
We thought we must do that also. We must meet the audience. We must talk with them. And we must take away all these walls between the stage and the audience. I think we saw some examples in festivals around the world that was awful to see. But the feeling was that musicians thought, don't disturb us. We are making art.
Right. This may or may not be true, but I feel that in a sense, the 70s, 80s, maybe until the point in the mid-90s, it was in a sense the high tide of modernism as a style, and classical contemporary music was a very serious business, and mostly written by men who scratch their beards and think about God and the universe. And Kroumata was in a sense an antidote to that, because you were sort of more about the communication, about the playfulness and energy. Even if you played serious music like Xenakis.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And after every concert, we run out to the audience and talk with them and answer all this question they had. Is it music that you read, or are you improvising, or all this? And we talk all these questions very seriously. And that was also, I think, the thing that we rise from 8 people in the audience in Luleå to 2,000 in the audience in Stockholm later on.
Right, exactly. And I mean, the whole organization Kroumata arose from the Concerts Sweden, this Rikskonserter, which is a sort of the idea of a social. We had that in Norway as well. This idea of in a social democracy, everyone should get to hear great music, even though you live in the smallest village. And so you relate to 8 people, or you relate to 2,000 people.
Exactly.
Do you think there's a connection there with because you were actually funded by or employed by Swedish Concerts Sweden, the Rikskonserter? So in a sense, just a parenthesis, you were kind of probably the only percussion ensemble in that category who was like a state-funded ensemble. It's based on this idea that you tour every little village there is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in many ways, it's harder, it's more difficult to play for 8 people and play for 2,000 people. You meet all these eyes and you see the fears and everything. And that is much, much harder. But actually, we were building as amateur spare time ensemble.
Yeah.
But we were employed by the Region Musik, that was called at that time. And we were supposed to be the percussion section in that wind orchestra. And rather soon after that, our schedule was better in advance than the orchestra. Mm-hmm. And often when they had a concert or a gig with the orchestra, we were booked for something in Hungary or Japan or something like that, and it was a little not easy to handle that situation. But then we had a nice director, Anders Jansson, his name, and he made us to build our own unit within the concert Sweden, and therefore we had all the support. Economically, of course, and we could commission pieces, we could record things, and we supposed to play in every little or big place.
Great. Is there anything to say about the technicality of this? How you got your global network management, logistics, money, funding? How was that organized? I mean, how do you go on the road as a percussion sextet? How do you tour Europe?
Yeah, I mean, we had all these duties in the ensemble. We never had an agent. We would try a lot of times to have an agent to help us with these things, but it was impossible. I think the agents thought this was too big, too much work. So we divided the duties among us 6, and something rode in a way that you were interested in some field, and then you had the feedback from the other 5 to be the person that handled the things. So one of us, Anders Logan, he was the guy that had much contacts during the world, and he could sell our concerts. And before him, that was a guy that more like formed our organization. His name is Martin Stasner.
And this is before email, so that we are talking telefax and letters, and yeah.
Exactly. And that is a nice story, actually. Back in 1982, we got a telex, this long paper line, sort of warm from the Künstleragentur Ost in East Berlin, asking us if we could have a little tour in the autumn, and we said no, sorry, we have a gig. We had one gig in that autumn, so we said it's impossible. And they come a new telex, and they told no, sorry, not this autumn. It's in 1987. It's in 5 years. Is it possible? And I said yes, absolutely, it's possible. And there we also learned that. The opening, the sort of key to be part of festivals was to say yes to the festival composer that wanted to do a little piece, and we say absolutely, we do it. And if it's good, we play it in other festivals as well. And that was often the opening for to be part of festivals.
You worked with Georg Katzer in DDR at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he did another excellent piece for us. I think the name is Geschlagene Zeit.
Yeah, beaten time.
With sort of theater thing in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also wrote a piece for my group where he works with Lewis Carroll texts and theatricality.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Very, very nice composer. Anyways, this is a bit of an aside, but to zoom out a little bit, 30 years of Kroumata, what are the top memories? And that's one question. And then the next question is, you kind of came into the percussion ensemble world in its golden golden years, in its golden age, in a sense. You had all the greatest pieces maybe written for you or for in your time. And how do you see that today? Do you feel that this music is still relevant? And how do you have like an advice for people who make percussion ensembles today? Should they think about percussion music? And what is percussion music today?
Wow, this is
sorry.
I start with the pieces. I think I start with I'm happy that I had to play all the really nice pieces, the huge and fantastic pieces from that time, and I think that was a little bit before all the percussion guys composed their own pieces. And if the classical percussion ensemble shall have a future, I think even the young ensemble must collaborate more with the composers. But the ensembles must also think more for themselves. I have a little analyze in our time in the Kroumata. The festivals was for the musicians, and the musicians was voice for the composers. For instance, if we can analyze the concert in the festival in England, what was the name of it now?
Huddersfield.
Huddersfield, yes. So there, I think that the perspective have changed. It is the composer festival, and the ensembles are making all they can to do what's in the score for from the composers. In my time, the musicians helped the composers to add the musician's point of view. And I think the musicians was a little bit stronger at that time to take for their own voice in the collaboration with the composers.
That's interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it's I think it's important to find this balance again, because now I think it's too boring to see this musicians doing all the things. And speaking of Huddersfield, I talked with some ensembles. I don't remember if they were from Holland or France or Germany, and they were so extremely happy, and they told me we have just foundings, and we will do a commission for a 40-minute long piece. And I said, why? Why do we need a 40-minute long piece? What composer can make an interesting piece for 40 minutes? There may be a handful of them.
Yeah.
It's much better to commission 4 pieces, 10 minutes each, that can have something in there who can explore the artistic. And nowadays, I think, like the painter, that the musicians are the frame, that are the tools of the experiment of the composers. When you perform a piece by Rolf Wallin or by Xenakis or Cage, the experiment is already done.
Mm-hmm. Right. These are very full-blown pieces.
Yeah.
As they come in the score, yeah.
And that is important, I think, for the future.
So since you mentioned those pieces, Stowaway by the Norwegian Rolf Wallin, Pleiades by Xenakis and Cage, are those some of the highlights from repertoire-wise from those years, you think?
They are, absolutely, they are. And later on in our career, we realized that the chamber music festivals hadn't enough money to have 6 people with hotels and flights and the bus with the instruments. So we started to think, is it more possible to be ensemble that can be invited by orchestras? Mm-hmm. And we started to ask the orchestras, and they said, no, we don't need any percussion ensemble. We have our own percussionists. Yes, we know. We said, you have your own violinist as well, but you still have a violin soloist every week. Mm. And we have never thought about it. But suddenly, a week before Christmas, I was in the office and the telephone rang, and that was Esa-Pekka. And he told me, I have commissioned a piece by a Mexican composer, Gabriela Ortiz. It's for our percussion ensemble, percussion section, but they think this is a little bit over the top. So is it possible for you to come and play it? And I said, yes. I didn't ask anyone. Playing 3 concerts as soloist with the LA Philharmonic and Esa-Pekka, it was no question. It was, yes, we will come. And it was the start of to commission more pieces for. So that was one of my top memories, of course, playing with that orchestra. But also when we had a couple of pieces for orchestra and percussion ensemble. After that, one of Rolf Wallin.
Tides, right?
Tides was a very nice piece, and I think I have never enjoyed practicing so much as in that part. I played the first vibraphone part in that piece, and
I play that as well. It's a really fun part to.
It's very fun to practice, actually, and it's nice the plan and everything like that.
Super nice,
yeah. And then our old friend Sven David Sandström that composed the drum piece, that also is one of the top memories, of course.
Yeah.
He also made a concert for us that we premiered in Gothenburg. I think also the change from a little cellar contemporary festival in Leipzig to the big concert hall in LA was a sort of feeling also, of course.
Yeah, a feeling of success and a feeling of achievement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So after you had played Pleiades in the mid-80s, I'm guessing 84 or something, you got the chance to commission Xenakis for a piece, and this is maybe the mid-90s, late 90s, a piece for trombone and 6 percussionists, and I think the trombonist was Christian Lindberg, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can you talk about that process? It was a very different piece than you expected, I'm guessing, because Xenakis had changed his aesthetics by then.
Yeah, really much. Or I think it was Christian that made this contract, and Xenakis, which we didn't know about, has started to write shorter pieces, and it was very short pieces, and this piece Cytos was for 6 marimbas and 1 trombone, and we told Christian, who was very enthusiastic, and we will never go on tour with 6 marimbas. You must understand it. But it's a fantastic piece, and he needs 2 bass marimbas as well. No, we will never go with bass marimbas, and never with 6 marimbas. But we played it actually, and on the fax machine, 2 A4 scores came, and we contacted his publisher again, this Salaber guy, and said, thank you so much, and when do we receive the rest of the piece? And he didn't understand what we was talking about. This is the piece. It's only to but it was cost 160,000 Swedish crowns. So, we were afraid when the accountants, in the constant Sweden should see about that, and it was so. And then we realized that his tempo was on 16th, so it was around 35 for a 16 note. 1. And the part of the marimbas was like, you're standing in a sort of amusement park or Tivoli, and you competing to nail this, with a hammer.
Yeah.
It was only banging as hard you could, and the trombone part was higher than Christian Lindberg ever had played. So he had half a year to hire his embouchure to get it.
Which says a lot, yeah.
Which says a lot. But unfortunately, that piece was played once.
Only once.
And no, only once.
I heard it once in Oslo. You played it in Oslo.
Maybe twice then.
Right, yeah. It wasn't much like Xenakis. It was as though he had forgotten what his signature was. All the notes were gone.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then we heard from our friend in England, Evelyn.
Glennie.
That she also in that period ordered a piece for
Omega.
Yeah, exactly. That is even shorter for bongos and chamber orchestra.
Yeah. You expected to get something spectacular and really virtuosic, and you got Tempo 35.
Then when he received the Polar Music Prize in the hand of the king in Stockholm, he was ill. So I think it was his daughter that was taking the prize. And we played this nice piece again.
And that's to be found online, I think. We can link to that in the
it is, absolutely.
Great. I remember also hearing you, we don't have to include this, but I heard you in Hanover in the World Exhibition 2000, and you were in Vienna for Percussion Festival, I think 2002.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you did all this kind of, the big halls, right? This was like Vienna Philharmonic or something.
And that was also a nice thing in 2000 in Hanover, because it was some theme, I think, someone had invented. So every country should supply with some percussionist. And every day at noon, we played Varese ionization. And it was a piece of paper that you could write in date and what part you wanted to play. And it was so fantastic. We were there a week, and I played always the same tarol part, this high.
Yeah.
And suddenly the day I realized that I was standing beside Pete Erskine, and he played the snare drum. And he had a completely different approach of the piece. And it was talking of, that is interesting. And I never thought about it. He were there playing sort of jazz, jump, plow, so. And suddenly we thought, hey, that is not Varese.
Yeah.
And our ensemble, that was the guys that invented this sort of pop music in the act strange when it was another guy that also took his liberties.
Liberties, right, yeah.
And another pop memory, of course, I must tell you about, it's in 2002. Stockholm celebrates its 750th year. And we had an idea that we should do a concert in the courtyard with us six, with all our friends that are percussion teachers in the town, and their the young students as well. So I think we were 50 or 60 percussionists, and we were on a meeting with. The program was based on Pleiades. And at that point, we did all the 4 movements without a conductor. And we organized and asked very polite, and we had a meeting with the king, because we know that he liked us. When he was celebrating his 50th birthday, he had 3 wishes. He wanted Kroumata and Stevie Wonder and a Scottish singer that's called Enya. That was fantastic. So we had a meeting with him, and it was interesting to have us performing his backyard, at the castle. And then suddenly one of us asked, Your Majesty, could it be possible that you can perform a piece with us? and he said, Hey, wait a second. You should do what you're best. I'm the king and you are percussionist. But after a while, he accepted. And we did improvisation.
Okay.
There were young percussionists with chimes in every window, improvising on and we were playing on the stage with some big lustra plates that we have from the radio. And under every chair in the audience, it was about 4,000 people there. It was a little jingle. The audience was also supposed to improvise with us. And then with the peak of the sound, we invited the king up, and he made one beat on the big bell that they use in Symphony Fantastique, this
right,
big
big
thing.
glocke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And everybody was silent. And then we had prepared with the archbishop that 3 people hold the thing to hit the bell up in the church nearby. And after that bell, we start improvising, and the king played along on the bell, and all the churches in the whole Stockholm improvised with this. So it was amazing thing.
Wow, sounds amazing.
And after the concert, people jingling with the bells, going by bus and subway, it was one of the most fantastic things.
Sounds spectacular. Can you say something about the challenges of being a full-time employed musician in the percussion ensemble that plays contemporary music, new pieces all the time? You're constantly rehearsing, you're constantly learning new music. It's loud, you're carrying a lot. What is the price, in a sense, for playing in a percussion ensemble for 30 years in terms of physical damage or otherwise psychological things?
I mean, to practice a lot and to be in this hall with all the percussion instruments it's not the most thing. I always thought it was nice to build my little setup, and I had some tom-toms chosen for me, and then I checked everybody so I could do it in the easiest way. And I think we all learned during the years where I need to practice and where I can play it anyway. You start sort of trusting yourself, and you start also to see that part I need to practice. I mean, otherwise it's always nice to practice things that you know about, or it sounds better in the practice room. But for to save time, we often share the parts, so it was easy for us to do it. I often played vibraphone and not so often xylophone. It was another guy that was a little faster in his hands, so he did all these things, and that made us also more fast in the learning process.
Yeah.
The harder thing, I think, was more like we were 6 completely different persons. Maybe some was more different than other, and acting, corresponding when someone thinks that you can do something better. It can be a long arguing that takes time, and you are tired of each other, and you are in different way. And also at that time, at the end of the ensemble, we everybody except one had families, and we have children, and suddenly you can't hang out on the rehearsing room all the night, all the day. You have to be more stricter. And also that calls for that you maybe always was not preparated on everything, and that was also sort of a challenge, and we were arguing about that, and
right.
All these things. I mean, we were sort of married for 30 years, and And suddenly I was a little fed up with all the things, and I started to talk with my guys that maybe I wanted to do something more. I mean, I had played professionally since I was 14 years old, so I mean, I had a long career.
Yeah.
I started to look a little bit, and actually I was invited for the final round into the festival general in a festival in Kristiansand. Mm-hmm. Chamber music festival there. Mm-hmm. The job went to another guy, but anyway, and the wonderful feeling of to be choiced after writing and thing was overwhelmed, and I think maybe I could do something more in my life than only play in this ensemble. And suddenly one morning, my friends had a speech during the evening before, and it was also called by one of our members that not our living anymore. He was away for a couple of years because he was really ill, and they picked me for the ensemble leader, and suddenly. How should I say it in a proper way? I could open up for these young guys in ensemble to have more reliable duties, and they felt immediately that it was interesting to work and they could do something. And then he went back and he was angry that something had changed, and he saw me as sort of enemy, that I have opened the door for these young guys. But I still think, and that maybe is from this Wienerwald's experience when I was 10 years old, that a leader must be a leader. A leader must take responsibility to make all his plans to be better and better and better. And suddenly this Monday morning, we sat in an ordinary meeting, and the guys said, since Leif is going now to Norway, and we have to make a new organization because Rikskonserter said they had no more space for us. We should be a free ensemble again. And they said, we will do that without you. They told this guy. And he went, of course, angry and sad, and, you know, of course that. But I think for to be a sort of small free group again, it was so important to pick the right people for to do it. Then the economic situation for this free group was under the half of the budget that we had before, and even if I didn't get that job, I had another job as the director for the Nordic Chamber Orchestra, and my friend Anders Holder, he also decided to, okay, I skip it now. I go to my school singing. I want to be a teacher, and they could manage with a new budget on 4 people. But it was a sort of sad and sort of bad taste in the mouth after all these years, and it ended with some bitterness and fight. Yes, exactly. Because after that, we just had to. We were towards our new anniversary, and we had commissioned a piece from Sofia Bubadulina, and this guy that we left behind us, he told the orchestras that Kroumata doesn't exist anymore, but I have a new ensemble, and this new ensemble is called the same title as a piece, and we will do it. And he did the premiere in Dresden and in Gothenburg and in Switzerland, and they did it in Berlin later on, I think, also. But Sten, what's his name? He was the chief in Bergen.
Sten Kraner.
Yeah, exactly. He said, no, that is impossible. I know that Kroumata exists, and I had made money to the Kroumata. So he had our ensemble to play it in Bergen, but I left before that.
Right.
But it's a little sad and a little bitter taste. But the other guys in the ensemble, we meet sometimes. And a couple of years ago, we celebrated our 40-year anniversary playing the same piece that we played in the first concert. And do you know what the piece was? It was Mandoror by...
I saw that online, Olav Anton Thomassen, that you conducted.
Olav Anton, exactly. Yeah.
It's a spectacular piece, so funny.
It's a spectacular piece.
Oh my God.
But we did it without the paintings.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a very special piece. But Leif, can you talk about the transition from being a percussionist into being a conductor and how you managed that transition? You went into a different career segment, so to speak, and also a different segment of the music business. And how did you prepare for that transition, and what sort of re-education or whatever did you have to undertake?
Yeah, I had some amateur or youth orchestras during all the time with Kroumata, and we often conduct each other in this ensemble rehearsals and so on. And when my youth orchestra in Norrbotten, up north in Sweden, celebrated our 10 years birthday, I had a sort of present from them to go to a conductor's seminar with this Finnish guy, famous guy, Jorma Panula. And that was a sort of opening eyes for me. And even there, I link back to my Wienerwalds experience. I mean, here I was in front of a professional orchestra, and I realized after 1-2 seconds that here is respect. If I meet them with fully respect, they will respect me, and I can do something with them. And I learned the hard way that you have about 8 seconds to establish a sort of respect or trust for each other. And after that, I conducted more and more, and I have been out in all these amateur symphony orchestras, and I have done some with Värmland Opera and Norrland Opera and so on. And then I started to think in the same way that we did in the Kroumata. Writing to some people, asking them if it's possible to do something. For instance, if it's possible to do that piece or that piece, and sometimes they don't answer, and sometimes they answer and say no, and sometimes they answer and say yes, and that is a sort of make a fishing in the lake, you know. And nowadays I have a fantastic thing. I work. And so to speak, my circle is rounded now. I was 14 years when I started this military band up north in Sweden. And now I am the artistic leader for all the Swedish military bands. And since 2 years, I am also now the chief conductor and artistic leader for this Lithuanian Wind Symphony. And that is also very interesting to build a repertoire with them. They are a former marching band with these pom-pom girls and everything, but they want to change focus to play more original music pieces, and that is okay. And often when I go to orchestras and suddenly the percussion guys wakes up and are very amused by that. I hear them, I see them, and I can say, hey, why not try that for a change and so on. And they are very unusual to have a conductor that say something to them. So there I am now. I'm this spring I will be 64, and I'm thinking of to retire from this military office job. Maybe next year, maybe the year after that, and then I want to be an artist again.
Right. Tell more about that. So, what are the next 10 years? What do the next 10 years have in store for you in terms of dream projects or stuff you want to realize?
I will do more conducting. I will broaden my net of orchestras, of course. And I will also, since all the Kroumata repertoire is located in a place in Stockholm, and I think many of these pieces are so extremely good music. So I will starting to offer me as a instructor or conductor or inspirational and see if in academia around the world, Horshold and so on, can play more of these old pieces.
Right.
I mean, as you say, we have some hit music, but there are also other pieces that are extremely good, but they haven't been played at all since the ensemble finished it back in 2015.
Why don't we make an appointment right now online for?
Yeah, we do that.
As a part of the podcast, you are officially invited to Freiburg.
Yeah, thank you. I should be honored to be in Freiburg.
I've been thinking about this piece, drums. Sorry.
Of course, you must do it.
Yeah, it's a sort of outdoor spectacle or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I did it up in Harstad a couple years ago with this. And we also did a wonderful piece by a Swedish composer named Anders Eliasson for a trumpet and percussion. That is also a sort of hidden hit that not are so broadly played, but it can be better.